Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a topic I know many of you are super curious about: longevity and diet. We're going to be unpacking the insights of Dr. David Sinclair, a genetics professor at Harvard.
Yeah, and he's like a living example of his research, I mean, the guy's 54, but honestly, he looks even younger now than he did 10 years ago. It's pretty wild.
I know, right?
Uh,
And apparently, his blood work shows he's biologically younger than he was in his 20s.
that's what I heard too. And a big part of that, he says, is down to his diet and lifestyle changes.
So that's exactly what we're going to be exploring this deep dive. Like, what does
Yeah.
this guy actually eat? What does he avoid? How does he put it all together, to achieve this amazing level of health and maybe even slow down aging?
Exactly. We're going to break it down, pull out the key takeaways, give you some practical tips you can maybe try out yourself along the way.
Perfect. Okay, so let's kick things off with exercise. Now, Dr. Sinclair isn't talking about like crazy marathon training here. He keeps it pretty simple. Like 3 times a week, do something that gets you breathing hard enough to be out of breath for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's all about reaching a state of what's it called? Hypoxia, which basically means lowering your oxygen levels.
So kind of like putting your body under a little stress, but in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. A good kind of stress. Like this low oxygen thing actually triggers all these positive changes in your body.
Like what?
Like it stimulates muscle growth, improves blood flow, and it can even release some chemicals that might help slow down aging. So you're kind of making your body tougher and more resilient.
That's super interesting. And I love that it's a manageable routine.
Yeah.
Like most people can actually fit that into their lives. It's not like hours at the gym, right?
Exactly. And the impact of this simple routine can be huge, could actually lower your risk of all those age-related diseases.
Right on. Now, for something I think is super fascinating, intermittent fasting, Dr. Sinclair really believes it's not just what you eat, but when you eat that matters.
He calls it time-restricted feeding. And it's a bit of a, I guess you could say, a mind shift. Like, it suggests that not eating for certain periods can actually be good for you. Like, it strengthens your body's defenses against aging and disease.
Hold on, you're telling me that not eating can actually make us healthier?
That's the idea. So Dr. Sinclair himself tries to eat within a 6-hour window each day. And usually it's just one big plant-based meal at dinner.
So he's essentially fasting for a big chunk of the day. But how does that actually work, like biologically?
Well, there are a couple of key things happening. First, fasting kind of kicks off this process called autophagy, which is basically like your body's way of spring cleaning. It clears out all the damaged parts and makes new, healthier ones.
Like a cellular cleanse. I like that.
Exactly. And then there's this other thing that gets activated. They're called sirtuins. They're genes. And they're like little bodyguards against age-related damage. They protect you from all sorts of things: diabetes, multiple sclerosis, even some types of cancer.
Whoa, that's pretty incredible. So basically, when we're not constantly eating, we're giving our bodies a chance to like repair and rejuvenate at a deeper level.
Yeah, that's the basic idea. And I know intermittent fasting can sound kind of intimidating, but Dr. Sinclair has a few tips to make it easier.
Oh, perfect. I'm sure our listeners are dying to know like how to actually do this.
Okay, so the first thing is staying hydrated. Gotta drink plenty of fluids throughout the day, water, tea, coffee, whatever keeps you going.
Good old H2O, always important.
Yep. And if you really need something to curb those hunger pangs, a small amount of protein can do wonders, like a handful of nuts or something.
So it's not about like starving yourself or anything crazy like that.
Not at all. It's about finding a pattern that works for you and sticking with it. Dr. Sinclair suggests, maybe try 16 hours of fasting, then an 8-hour eating window.
But doesn't it take a while for your body to get used to that?
Yeah, definitely. It takes a couple of weeks. In the beginning, you might feel a little hungry, maybe your energy dips a bit, especially as your liver adjusts. But the cool thing is, after about 2, maybe 3 weeks, your liver gets the hang of it, starts producing glucose more steadily, and you don't get those crazy energy crashes and hunger pangs anymore.
So it's not really about willpower. It's more like retraining your body's energy system.
Exactly. Once you get past that initial adjustment, you might even find yourself feeling more energized and focused throughout the day.
Now, before we get into the specifics of Dr. Sinclair's diet, I'd love to hear what you guys think about intermittent fasting. Do you think you could try it? Could this kind of eating pattern fit into your life?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think it's worth trying, at least experimenting with it a bit. What about you? Does it sound like something you could see yourself doing?
I'm definitely intrigued. Okay, so moving on to the foods Dr. Sinclair actually eats for longevity. One of the big things is that he's mostly plant-based now, and he's a big fan of the Mediterranean and Okinawan diets.
Right. And he talks a lot about stress plants, which are basically plants that have gone through some tough times, like drought, extreme temperatures, that sort of thing.
Wait, are we supposed to be like stressing out our plants now?
No, no, not exactly. It's more about understanding this concept called xenohormesis. Basically, when plants are stressed, they produce all these beneficial compounds to protect themselves. They're called polyphenols.
So they're like building up their own defenses.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, when we eat these stressed plants, it's like we're borrowing their defenses. We might activate our own protective pathways, which could be super beneficial for health and longevity.
Wow, that's wild. So how do we find these stressed plants at the grocery store? Do we have to like interrogate the produce guy about their life story?
Uh-huh. No, not quite. Just think vibrant colors. Like deeply colored fruits and veggies are usually a good sign. Berries, kale, even that glass of Pinot Noir. Those vibrant hues often signal those awesome polyphenols.
Okay, I'm already starting to plan my next shopping trip.
Mm.
So what does Dr. Sinclair actually eat on a daily basis? Like, what are his go-to foods?
He starts his day with matcha green tea, which is packed with EGCG, a powerful polyphenol, great for fighting inflammation and maybe even helping to prevent cancer. Then he focuses a lot on leafy greens, especially spinach. It's loaded with iron and vitamins. And for cooking, he loves olive oil. Good source of oleic acid, which is linked to those longevity guardians we talked about earlier, sirtuins.
This all sounds pretty delicious and not super restrictive. Like, it's
Yeah.
doable.
Totally. And while Dr. Sinclair is mostly vegan these days, he does say that the Mediterranean and Okinawan diets are excellent examples of how to eat for longevity. He actually followed the Okinawan diet for years before going fully plant-based.
So there's some wiggle room for those of us who aren't ready to give up meat completely.
Absolutely. The key takeaways here are prioritize colorful fruits and veggies, incorporate healthy fats like olive oil, and maybe think about reducing your overall meat consumption.
This is all so fascinating. Okay, so we've covered exercise, intermittent fasting, and the power of stressed plants. It's amazing to think how small changes can have such a huge impact on our health. So before we move on to what Dr. Sinclair actually avoids eating, let's take a moment to let all this sink in. What resonates with you the most so far?
It's pretty amazing how Dr. Sinclair combines the science with practical advice. He's not about strict rules, it's more about understanding how our bodies work and making choices that help them do their thing. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really drawn to the intermittent fasting thing. Like the idea that it can trigger these powerful cellular repair mechanisms is just wow. And that whole xenohormesis concept, choosing foods that have built up their own defenses, I think that's super cool. What about you?
Totally agree. It's pretty mind-blowing how simple choices, like opting for a salad over a bag of chips, can have such a profound impact on our well-being. But before we get too excited about what to eat, maybe we should switch gears and talk about what Dr. Sinclair avoids putting on his plate. Are you ready to uncover the dietary villains?
Oh, absolutely. Let's do it. Okay,
Okay.
so let's get into the foods Dr. Sinclair recommends steering clear of, if you're really aiming for that optimal longevity. And I guess no big surprise here, but sugar is at the top of the list.
Yeah, sugar, gotta love it, but man, it can really mess with your health in the long run.
So what's the deal with sugar and aging specifically? I mean, we all know it's linked to weight gain and stuff, but how does it actually impact the aging process itself?
Well, think of it this way. High blood sugar is like, it kind of caramelizes your body over time, damages proteins, messes with all these important metabolic processes.
So it's not just about fitting into those skinny jeans, it's about like protecting yourself from some serious health issues down the road.
Exactly. And cancer cells, they absolutely love sugar.
Right, right. Fuel for the bad guys. So Dr. Sinclair is really cautious about sugar. I mean, all types of sugar. Or are some worse than others?
He's especially careful with glucose and fructose. Those are the main culprits. Like, he avoids sugary drinks, processed foods, obvious stuff, and he even limits fruit, especially fruit juice. Because the juice, it's like a concentrated sugar bomb without the fiber to slow things down.
Okay, so that makes sense. But wait, don't our bodies need sugar for energy? Like, won't cutting it out completely cause problems?
That's a common worry, but honestly, your body's way smarter than that. It can actually make its own glucose, through a process in the liver.
So we don't necessarily have to rely on, like, eating sugar for energy.
Nope, your body's got a backup plan. And Dr. Sinclair actually thinks our livers are much better at regulating blood sugar than our cravings are.
Haha, so true. So it's more about, like, reducing our reliance on added sugars and letting our bodies do their thing.
Exactly. And hey, if you gotta have that occasional sweet treat, there are ways to do it smarter. Like Dr. Sinclair suggests eating sweets after a meal because the other foods can help slow down the sugar absorption. And he also likes those natural sweeteners like monk fruit or stevia. Sweetness without the metabolic mayhem.
Smart strategies. Okay, so sugar's out. What else does Dr. Sinclair say we should be avoiding?
Next up, bread. Yeah, I know. This one can be tough for a lot of people.
I hear ya. Bread is like a staple for so many of us. So why is it on the no list for longevity?
Well, especially white bread, the refined stuff, it basically acts like a simple carb. Gets broken down into sugar super fast, leading to those energy spikes and crashes we talked about before.
Ah, those sugar roller coasters always leave you feeling kind of blah.
Totally. Dr. Sinclair actually noticed a huge difference in his blood sugar and just his overall well-being after he cut out bread. He said he felt way more focused and energized.
So maybe swapping those refined grains for whole grains could be a good first step for
Yeah.
people who aren't ready to go completely bread-free.
Yeah, definitely. Baby steps. Find what works for you. Now, another thing Dr. Sinclair mostly avoids is meat. He says he loves the taste, but he thinks plant protein is better for longevity, mainly because of the amino acids.
What's so special about the amino acids in plant protein?
Well, they seem to be better at activating those longevity genes we keep talking about, sirtuins, and they have a gentler effect on another pathway called mTOR. See, too much protein, especially animal protein, can overstimulate mTOR, which might actually be bad for longevity.
So it's not necessarily about going full vegetarian, it's more about striking a balance.
Exactly. Dr. Sinclair still has fish now and then, especially for the omega-3s, and he doesn't say never eat meat, just prioritize the plant-based proteins.
Makes sense. Okay, anything else on the avoid list?
Dairy is another one he's cut back on. He noticed his biomarkers improved when he reduced dairy, probably because of the lower protein load.
So maybe dialing back on protein in general, especially animal protein, could be a good takeaway here.
That's one way to look at it. And last but not least, Dr. Sinclair's really cut back on alcohol. Turns out even that moderate daily drinking might not be so great for longevity, according to the latest research.
So even that nightly glass of wine might be something to reconsider.
Yeah, possibly. But being a wine enthusiast himself, Dr. Sinclair does have a suggestion for those who do enjoy a glass. He says, go for those stress-sensitive grapes like Pinot Noir. They tend to have higher resveratrol content.
So a little Pinot Noir is okay, especially if those grapes have had a hard life. It all comes back to those awesome plant compounds.
Right. Those stress plants really are something else.
Okay, we've covered so much. Exercise, intermittent fasting, the power of stressed plants, and now all the things Dr. Sinclair tries to avoid. This is really making me rethink my own diet, I gotta say. What's been the biggest aha moment for you so far?
I think the most inspiring thing is realizing how much control we actually have over how we age. Dr. Sinclair's whole approach isn't about restriction. It's about understanding the science and finding what works best for each person. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree. And what I love is that it's about balance and sustainability, not deprivation. Dr. Sinclair's not saying you have to suffer to live longer. It's about making choices that feel good for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's about enjoying your food, but also respecting its power to influence your health and longevity.
Speaking of powerful influences, maybe we should move on to the final piece of the longevity puzzle supplements. Let's talk about resveratrol, NMN, and metformin. Why does Dr. Sinclair take these, and what do they actually do? Okay, so supplements. Now, before we get into specifics, it's important to note that Dr. Sinclair isn't like officially recommending or selling these things. He's just sharing what he personally takes, right?
Yeah, good point. And of course, talk to your doctor before you start taking anything new, especially if you have any health conditions or you're on other medications.
Right. Always good advice. So, with that out of the way, what's Dr. Sinclair actually taking? The first one that caught my eye was resveratrol. You know, that red wine molecule everyone's talking about.
Yeah, resveratrol. That's one of those beneficial plant polyphenols we were talking about. Remember the ones plants produce when they're under stress? It's found in grapes and, yeah, red wine. Dr. Sinclair takes about a gram a day, usually with yogurt.
Interesting. You know, I remember a few years back, it was all about antioxidants. Like that was the key to slowing down aging. But it seems like Dr. Sinclair is moving away from that idea now.
Yeah, you're right. Studies haven't really shown that antioxidants alone can actually extend lifespan. Dr. Sinclair's approach is more about like activating the body's own defense systems, not just trying to neutralize free radicals with antioxidants.
So it's about empowering our bodies to do what they do best.
Gotcha. Okay, resveratrol, that's one. What else is he taking?
NMMN. That stands for nicotinamide mononucleotide. It's a form of vitamin B3, and basically it helps boost NAD plus levels in the body. Okay, time for a little science refresher. What exactly is NAD plus again, and why is it so important?
Think of NAD plus as this like essential molecule for energy and communication within your cells, kind of like the spark plug that keeps everything running smoothly. And it's really important for those longevity guardians, the sirtuins, to do their job. The thing is, as we get older, our NAD plus levels naturally decline. And that might be one reason why we start to see all those age-related issues.
So taking NMN is kind of like giving our cells a little energy boost, helping those sirtuins function better.
Exactly. And it's still early days, but there have been some promising clinical trials with NMN showed improvements in cholesterol levels and blood pressure.
That's encouraging. Okay, so resveratrol, NMN, anything else on the list?
This one might surprise you, metformin. It's actually a diabetes medication, but it's getting a lot of attention in the longevity world because it seems to have anti-aging effects.
I gotta be honest, I'm always a little hesitant about taking medication if I don't have a specific condition. Is it safe?
I totally get that. But metformin has a really good safety record. It's been around for a long time. And what's interesting is that studies have shown people who take metformin, even those without diabetes, they actually tend to live longer and have a lower risk of all sorts of age-related diseases.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Like, what kinds of diseases are we talking about?
We're talking heart disease, frailty, even Alzheimer's. It seems to offer pretty broad protection.
Okay, that's definitely something to think about. So to recap, Dr. Sinclair is taking resveratrol, NMN, and metformin, all aimed at supporting cellular health and maybe even slowing down aging.
Yep, that's the gist of it. But again, this is just what works for him. It's not a one-size-fits-all prescription. Everyone's different, right? So always do your research, talk to your doctor, and figure out what's best for you.
For sure. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. Dr. Sinclair's diet, what he eats, what he avoids, plus those supplements he takes. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive into the world of longevity. It's amazing to think that we might be able to actually slow down aging and live longer, healthier lives. What's been the biggest takeaway for you?
I think it's just realizing how much power we have. It's not all about genetics or fate. Dr. Sinclair shows us that we can make choices that actually influence how we age. We're not just passive passengers in this whole process.
I love that. So much to think about. And as we wrap up, here's a question for all of you listening. If you could implement just one of Dr. Sinclair's recommendations, which one would it be? Would you add more of those stress plants to your diet? Maybe give intermittent fasting a shot? Or perhaps even explore the world of supplements? What do you think would have the biggest impact on your own health and longevity?
Yeah, great question. There's no right or wrong answer. It's all about what resonates with you, what feels doable, what aligns with your goals, right?
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep learning, keep experimenting. This whole health and longevity thing, it's a journey, a very personal one.
And remember, aging is a natural part of life. But how we age, that's something we have a lot of control over. By making smart choices, we can aim to live not just longer, but healthier, more vibrant, more fulfilling lives.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.